Alright, man, peace. So for many of you brothers who've been on my channel for long enough, you know that I have been following this Chanel Lewis case over the course of the past 2 years. And even though I've always known that eventually he would be found guilty, I've always maintained that, in my view, especially when examining so many of the important components, or at least in my view, the important components of this case, that there was undoubtedly in my mind something rotten in Denmark. I've just never believed that they could have footage of Katrina Vetrano running through Spring Creek Park, but then not have any footage of Mr. Chanel Lewis entering the park himself. I'm a firm believer that if he was indeed the person who committed the murder, that they would have had very clear footage of him, if not entering the park or being in the park, certainly walking somewhere in the vicinity of the park. I find it very difficult to believe that they have no footage of this young man walking somewhere adjacent to the park before he entered and found her, stumbled upon her, whatever terminology you want to use, and then proceeded to rape and kill her. I just don't believe it. And the only thing that we're supposed to go on is his own testimony against himself in the interrogation room, where it seemed as if he was being prompted, prodded, coached, per se, by the interrogators to quote unquote confess to a crime that he may have committed or may not have committed. I just have not seen enough evidence. And certain people may say, what are you talking about? His DNA was found under her fingernails. His DNA was found here and there. I need to know why his DNA was not found where it needed to be found for someone who allegedly raped and killed someone. That's what I need to know. I need to know why none of Chanel Lewis's blood, semen, or hair were found at the crime scene if he's someone who raped and killed a female who supposedly had his DNA under her fingernails. As I stated in a previous video pertaining to this topic, there is no doubt that with DNA evidence, your presence at a certain crime scene can be confirmed, proven, or what have you, and it can add to the prosecution's case to convict you. But now it's easier than it's ever been to frame someone because of quote-unquote DNA evidence. Now it has come to light that a certain letter was sent to Chanel Lewis's defense team stating that originally the police department was searching for two quote-unquote jacked up white dudes, which goes right along with my theory that, in my view, I believe that Katrina Vetrano's father has something to do with this. It's just my view of it, just my perspective. And of course, everything that I'm saying is alleged. Supposedly on the day that Katrina Vetrano was killed, strangled, murdered, what have you, she asked her father if he wanted to go out on their normal run together. He claimed he did not because his back hurts. Suddenly, that's the day that travesty, that atrocity happens to your daughter. It's very strange. And he's the person who finds her in the bushes. The police comb the area for a long period of time. They sent out a search party for someone who had only disappeared for a couple of hours, when normally it's police procedure to wait 72 hours to send out a search party for a missing person. Nobody sees anything strange about that. It's very clear to me that this situation occurred because of one or two things. Either this was some type of Luciferian or satanic ritual sacrifice, or Katrina Vetrano's father owed somebody money. Those are the only two things that make sense to me. And the fact that it seems like the police department is confederate with Katrina Vetrano's father lends credence, in my view, to the first theory. Now, the fact that the description of the original assailants was two jacked up white guys, that lends credence to my second theory, but we'll find out. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Summations are scheduled to begin tomorrow in the retrial of a Brooklyn man accused of killing Queens jogger Katrina Vetrano. The first trial ended in a hung jury.
Look at this dude's face. This dude looks bugged out of his damn mind. He looks like he does not know up from down. And far be it from me to underestimate anyone, but I just don't see it. When I looked at this dude's physique in the interrogation video, he does not look like he has the strength to do all that to Katrina Vetrano. But then again, you never know. Maybe he's like Edward Norton in Primal Fear. He's suffering from some form of multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, and he just snaps into some type of bestial rage and has super strength. Who the hell knows? I doubt it, though, especially since, once again, none of his semen, blood, or hairs were found at the crime scene.
And this weekend, the defense said it received new information that could throw the case another curveball. CBS News' Lisa Rosner has more.
There's been 2 weeks of testimony in the retrial of 22-year-old Chanel Lewis of East New York. He is accused of sexually assaulting Katrina Vetrano and strangling her in August 2016 as she jogged in Spring Creek Park in Howard Beach.
Brothers, let me say one thing, though, just as an aside. We always have to remember that there is such a thing as being in the wrong place or at the wrong place at the wrong time. What do I mean by that? There's a saying that an idle mind is a devil's toolbox. Sometimes brothers have the tendency to just meander about or hang around on corners or say, you know what, I have nothing better to do. Let me just go to this area or that area. For those of us who are from New York, we know that Howard Beach has a legacy of being ardently racist. We know that for a fact. So why Chanel Lewis chose that park in the vicinity of that neighborhood to go express himself or to vent steam, that's assuming that he actually was there that day. Why he would choose to do that shows a lack of wherewithal, a lack of prudence, so on and so forth. I say all that to say this. Brothers, when you're out there on the street, have somewhere to go. Have somewhere to go. Know why you're going there. This concept of just hanging around on the corners and just meandering about, having nowhere to go, not knowing why you're moving in the direction that you're moving is not a good thing. It's going to lead to very bad things for you. Potential catastrophe. So whenever you're out of your home, know where you're going, know why you're going there. To me, it's not that difficult a concept to comprehend.
And Monday, defense attorneys plan to submit motions seeking a hearing based on an anonymous letter mailed to them and the Queens District Attorney Friday. CBS News reports the letter claims to be written by an NYPD detective and reads in part during the...
It's a very interesting photo right here. I'm not going to allege that she necessarily is a Luciferian herself, but as we can see, she covers one of her eyes with her hair. The left eye is exposed. We know that the left eye is the eye of Hathor, and she's gone out of her way to point her index finger to her temple. Could she have been raised in a Luciferian environment? It's possible. You never know. I noted in my last video that the father was walking into the courtroom dressed in all black with the horn or the cornuto necklace on for Pan. I had certain people come into my comment section and say that that is a cultural thing, that is something that Italians wear. Let me say this very quickly. 99.9% of people have no idea where their culture comes from and have no idea where most of their cultural practices come from. They really don't know. Most people just talk shit all day. They'll claim that this is what we do in my country or this is what we do in my culture, and they really have no idea where it comes from. They just do things because the generation before them did it and taught them to do it. But just to get back to the point, if I were a betting man, would I say that Katrina Vetrano or her family were Luciferians per se, or that she was raised in a Luciferian environment? Not necessarily. Not necessarily, but you never know. Wicca, witchcraft, Luciferianism is on the rise big time, and you have many Luciferian bloodline families living all across the planet Earth that people just don't know about. You work next to them at your job. You're working out next to them in the gym. You know, you think that you're a believer in God or the Most High or whatever, something righteous, a righteous concept, and so do they. They believe that venerating Pan is a righteous thing. So don't be surprised about what's going on around you. Always be astute and aware and walk circumspectly. That's the point. But at the end of the day, it's very clear to me that what's being reported in the news about this situation is not what actually occurred. Because one thing I know for sure is that if this dude Chanel Lewis was at the park, the police would have went above and beyond to provide video footage of him entering the park or him being there or walking away from the park or what have you. I don't even think that Chanel Lewis is mentally competent enough to know where he was that day. He may be someone who liked to frequent the park. He probably was not even there that day and don't even know where the hell he was at. But maybe due to the fact that he's frequented Spring Creek Park in the past, just for them to suggest that to him and tell him that if you admit to this, we'll let you go, that's enough for people who are mentally incapacitated to agree to it. Once again, just go back and watch the interrogation. He clearly was being coached and prompted to say certain things.
During the first weeks of investigations, an NYPD chief stated on several occasions at these meetings that police were looking for two jacked up white guys who were from Howard Beach.
Very interesting. So the police chief said they're looking for two jacked up white guys who are from Howard Beach. Sounds like some type of mafia hitmen. Allegedly.
The defense claims the anonymous letter demonstrates key evidence had been withheld during the retrial.
What's new?
In a statement, the Legal Aid Society, which represents Lewis, said, "We learned that the police approached our Mr. Lewis to obtain a DNA swab as part of a race-biased dragnet, which involved the swabbing of over 360 African-American men in Howard Beach and other neighboring sections of Brooklyn and Queens."
Brothers, you know what's so interesting about this? Supposedly, there were no eyewitnesses to this assaulted murder of Katrina Vetrano. There were none. Supposedly, there's no footage of Chanel Lewis entering the park or leaving the park. So why would they all of a sudden be looking for a so-called African-American man, much less swabbing the DNA of over 360 African-American men? Where would they get the idea that they were searching for a so-called black man in the first place? Who told them that they saw a so-called African-American man in Spring Creek Park, much less one who was looking suspicious, much less one who was raping a woman or killing a woman? How did they get this idea in the first place? If, once again, there's no footage of him entering or leaving the park and there were no eyewitnesses.
A spokesperson for the Queens District Attorney says prosecutors will respond here in court accordingly and declined further comment. Prosecutors, though, have said in this trial that tests prove it was the DNA of Lewis found on Vetrano's body. Sanford Rubenstein is a civil rights attorney who's also handled criminal cases. He says the judge will decide whether to even hold the hearing on the letter. How much will the judge question the source of the letter and its legitimacy?
I think certainly the prosecution will be given an opportunity to raise the fact that it was not necessary, it was not required.
The NYPD said over the last 2 years it already exhaustively examined the issues in this anonymous 11th-hour letter, a missive riddled with falsehoods and inaccuracies.
That's interesting. They claim that the missive is riddled with falsehoods and inaccuracies. But they were the ones who've been botching this investigation from the very beginning. I covered most of that in my last video pertaining to this case. At the end of the day, Chanel Lewis, once again, is a person who seemed to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe was never there at all, and maybe is someone who is just so accustomed to associating himself with a certain environment and is so detached from reality that he agreed to something that might cost him his freedom. At the end of the day, there are just too many gaps in this overall narrative or storyline for me to be able to accept exactly what they claim occurred. Now, had they found blood, semen, or any of his hair follicles anywhere near that person, then I would have said okay. But let's also understand that they were able to take some of his DNA, and who knows how or where they may have planted it on her body to build a case against him. At the end of the day, somebody's hiding something. You don't go from a description of two jacked up white boys to somebody who looks like this and there not be some method to your madness. It just doesn't work like that.
Legal experts say the judge could decide to hold a hearing after a verdict comes down. In Kew Gardens, Queens, Lisa Rosner, CBS 2 News.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, brothers. Chanel Lewis is set to be sentenced tomorrow morning. I'm pretty sure that he is going to do a lot of time. Once again, watch where you go. Watch for the reason that you go there. Always make sure that when you leave your home, you know why you're leaving your home and that you have somewhere to go. Always make sure that you have somewhere to go. When you're on the move, be on the move. Know what environment you're entering into. What are the demographics of those environments? What's the history of that environment? Whatever the history is of where you're going should determine how high you raise your antennas. Okay, so now, brothers, this is the update to the Chanel Lewis case. As we all know by now, Chanel Lewis was sentenced to life in prison. We all knew that that was what was going to happen. Once again, do I believe that he's a dude that committed the murder? No, I do not. I think that they found an appropriate patsy with a quote-unquote learning disability and psychological disorders. But once again, brothers, always pay very close attention to the photos that these media outlets choose to use, because they tend to be very revelatory. They're now constantly using this photo right here of Miss Katrina Vetrano with her right eye covered while she has her left index finger pointed up against her temple to denote that she's someone in the craft, in the know, or what have you, or that she's related to people who are in the craft or in the know, or that the people that she's related to know people who are in the craft or in the know, something along those lines. But there's certainly something that's rotten in Denmark about this case. Was she a sacrifice? Who knows? The murder that occurred happened in a public park. We know that many of these sacrifices, especially pertaining to the Mother Goddess, tend to happen out in the woods, whether it be in parks or forests, etc. Why is that? Because once again, the quote-unquote Mother Goddess is also known as Mother Earth, so on and so forth. Am I saying that that is what happened with this case? No, not necessarily. But the facts, and I put facts in quotes, are just not adding up. Mr. Chanel Lewis, even though her DNA was found under his fingernails, there was no semen found on her or in her from him. There was no blood from him found on her or in her, despite the fact that supposedly she scratched him. There were no hair follicles found from him on her. So it's just not adding up in my view. I need somebody to explain to me if, supposedly, the motivation for Chanel Lewis in attacking Katrina Vetrano was lust and anger towards women, that none of his bodily fluids were found on her or in her. That's not according to me, that's according to his lawyer, Jenny Chung. So someone's going to have to break that down for me. Once again, there's no video footage of Chanel Lewis entering or leaving the park. Where's the video footage? We see all the footage of Miss Vetrano jogging through the park, dressed scantily clad. Not saying that she deserved to be quote-unquote raped or attacked because she was dressed in that manner. I'm just saying that most women today dress in a very irresponsible way out in public. That's all I'm saying. But at the end of the day, do I believe that Chanel Lewis was involved in her quote-unquote rape and or murder? No, I do not. There's just not enough evidence.
Karina got justice, and the murderer got his justice.
A jogger gets justice. An emotional day in court as Katrina Vetrano's parents face their daughter's killer before his sentencing.
This dude looked bugged out of his damn mind.
Good evening, I'm Christine Johnson.
I'm Maurice Dubois. It's a case that's captivated the tri-state for almost 3 years now, and after an arrest, 2 trials, and claims of jury coercion, Chanel Lewis has been sentenced to life in prison.
CBS 2's Hazel Sanchez has more now on the emotional day in court and 2 devastated families.
What happened to the 2 big white guys that the police allegedly were looking for initially? To be honest with you, that makes far more sense because I just don't see this dude being able to do all the damage to that young lady that allegedly he did. Especially since, in my view, she clearly was in better shape than him. At the very least, he was going to have some scratches on his face, some punch marks on his face. There was going to be a lot more DNA exchange than just his DNA being found under her fingernails.
Phil Vetrano is convinced Chanel Lewis is a born killer.
As an angry, violent boy, he told the teacher he wanted to bring a knife to school and kill all the girls. As an angry, violent man, he made good on that threat the night he killed the brightest light in the world.
The Oscar award goes to you. Not one tear coming down your face. Ain't that a bitch?
My baby girl.
Today, he, his wife Kathy, and their surviving children urged the judge to sentence Lewis to a life behind bars for the death of their beloved Karina.
After he had already killed, he searched on his phone how to forcibly rape someone.
Earlier this month, Lewis was...
Okay, so he's a little crazy. Okay, I get it. He's a little bugged out of his damn mind. But if people were to go through some of the Google searches that the average person puts forth, and you might not know the context behind it, you might come to some different assumptions. Me, myself, I might go to Google and type in ISIS. It doesn't mean that, that I'm interested in terrorism. It means that I'm trying to do research on the Mother Goddess, things of that nature. So who knows what the hell Chanel Lewis was trying to do. Look, we know the man is bugged out, okay? I'm not going to try to make any excuses for this dude when it comes to his mental acuity. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough substance. There's not enough facts. There's not enough information or evidence to corroborate the notion that he was involved in the rape and the death of that woman.
Lewis was found guilty of murdering and sexually abusing 30-year-old Katrina Vetrano while she was out for a run in Howard Beach in 2016.
Sexually abusing her but no semen on her body?
Vetrano's mother condemned Lewis in court.
While we suffered and died 1 million deaths every second of every day, you breathed, you ate, you searched your phone for pornography. You are, and you remain true to your character as a pathetic, evil coward.
Let's check your husband's phone. What's he searching for on his damn phone?
Lewis's mother and family sent letters of support to the judge and did not speak in court. Lewis had confessed on tape to killing Vetrano, but today he denied it.
You don't want to say, Judge, that I'm innocent. And I'm sorry for the family's loss, but I didn't do this.
Lewis was unemotional, yawning as...
Well, bro, that's what you should have said when they were interrogating you.
as Judge Michael Eloise sentenced him to life in prison without parole.
Shame on you!
After the sentencing, Lewis's mother and his supporters were seen following the prosecuting attorneys, accusing the district attorney's office and Judge Eloise of racial bias.
I'm here to represent my son, and I will keep fighting for Chanel. In the name of Jesus, I will keep on fighting until the last breath leaves my body.
Bamba.
Today, everybody got justice. Karina got justice, and the murderer got his justice.
As the judge said in court, this is a lose-lose for both families, and the emotional journey is not over.
Well, it's a lose sacrifice for both families, because I do believe that there's some Luciferianism afoot. I have very little doubt about that. At the very least, either the father's a Luciferian or he owed somebody some money, but something very strange here.
Chanel Lewis's attorneys say they plan to appeal. In the newsroom, Hazel Sanchez, CBS 2 News.
But anyway, brothers, once again, we have to always take inventory of where we're going and why we're there. What areas are we frequenting, and are we there for a real constructive purpose, or are we there just to meander around? Because if you just want to hang out somewhere and just stand on a corner, trouble can find you. So peace.